Hello, everybody. As folks are joining the session here, I'll wait another minute or two and then we'll get started. Hello, folks. We'll give about one more minute here and then we'll jump right in. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Moving On, Shifting Your On-Premise EPM to OCI. Today's session will be presented by Jeff Henkel and myself, Joe Malawicki. Before we get started, I just want to mention a couple upcoming topics. We're looking to schedule a series of webinars. Here are a couple of the areas that we're looking to post. As always, if you have any questions, or if you have any particular topics you want us to discuss, feel free to email us and we'll be happy to put that onto our agenda. So again, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, in which we'll be discussing just how safe and secure it is. Just how safe and simple it is to lift and shift your Oracle EPM Hyperion workloads and ecosystems from the on-premise environments to the best performing and most cost-effective cloud platform available today. During this informative session, we plan on talking about our own real-world experiences with migrating from on-prem to OCI environments. Please feel free throughout the session to post any questions in the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll do our best to answer those after the material has been presented. Thank you again for joining us, and let's dive right in with today's material. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our company for those of you who don't know who we are. IRX Solutions is proud to be offering our services and solutions now in our 10th year of operation. Our team of onshore certified architects and engineers have been servicing our clients globally with decades of cumulative experience in the EPM and cloud technology arenas. We offer full advisory services, implementation, design, execution, all the way through 24/7 day 2 support offerings. We're an Oracle certified cloud sell, build, and services partner, as well as we hold partner certifications for Rackware, Azure, and AWS. At IRX Solutions, we pride ourselves with our client and partner relationships. We're proud to say that we have a 100% return rate for direct clients and are listed as one of the top 5 rated service providers on Oracle's own services marketplace today. We truly don't sell only consulting services. We strive to build relationships. So I want to jump right in with a quick poll question to make sure everyone's awake on the webinar today. So I'm going to launch the question in a couple seconds here. Please take a moment, if you don't mind, to try to answer the following question. Which is the most common theme of reluctance to upgrading or changing infrastructure for EPM, Hyperion, or Essbase customers? We'll take about 20, 30 seconds to let you folks answer that question. And then we'll share the results. And another 5 seconds, and then we'll close this out and we'll keep going here. All right. So we'll end the poll and we'll share some results here. All right, so interesting enough. So which is the most common theme of reluctance to upgrading or changing infrastructure for EPM, Hyperion, or Essbase? Well, it's kind of interesting. And this is a split which we see very, very common. First off, it's all the above, believe it or not. And I think you folks kind of showed that it's a mixed emotion with the 40 or so, 30 or so participants who answered here. A move in infrastructure is too expensive seems to be the number one. And we do hear that a lot. A lot around that, it stems not only from the cost of the actual platform you're moving to, but there's a time element of cost, which we'll dig into deeper in today's presentation. Takes too much time. We can't afford the outage. Another huge one. We all know Hyperion, Essbase, EPM, pick a name, right? It's changed over the years with the product suite. It is a critical financial system for most organizations who own licenses for it. So having an outage does impact business. Great thing is about cloud migrations, there are easy ways to actually keep your environment up and running almost real time the entire time you're in your migration project. Too much risk to the application data system. Very, very, again, kind of ties back in with the prior answer here. It's a critical financial system. And finally, the last one, which I'm very surprised happened to be higher, is looking at a software as a solution or a SaaS-based tool or option. Again, it's very, very common this day and age. If a customer is going to migrate or upgrade to something else, they're going to look around all the options out there. So thank you for sharing that information with us. I appreciate that. So why should you consider moving to cloud infrastructure? Well, all the standard cloud reasons still apply today. And I'm sure any of you here who are not first timers to the whole cloud model or cloud concept are hearing this over and over and over. The big reason is corporate mandates. Everyone and their uncle is saying nowadays, you got to go cloud, got to go cloud, got to go cloud. And we all know in the IT world, what's a cloud? It's somebody else's computer, right? It still hasn't changed. But there are a lot of good reasons for that. Another standard reason we hear about, or a reason why you should consider moving to cloud infrastructure, is you're probably running on legacy or old hardware right now. This is, I want to say, the number one, if you will, motivator or compelling event that we hear from customers is that, listen, our hardware is out of warranty. We're not going to go buy these new Dell or HP racks are being decommissioned. What do we do now? We can't get parts, literally parts for our hardware, okay, because out of warranty, out of support. Underperforming is an area we do hear a lot that people say, well, it's running slow. And Jeff will later on talk about an example of a customer who simply went from an on-prem decent based hardware to an OCI based infrastructure as a phase one migration, how their performance just skyrocketed with a simple move. Software being out of date, out of support. If you're on an old version of Oracle EPM, Hyperion as an example, anything older than 11.2, you are technically out of support. On a software support, I should say. Everyone's doing it. Back to the first point, everyone is moving to the cloud. I want to talk about a couple other options, though, or some reasons why you should consider cloud infrastructure as a possible home for your EPM system. First off, it's pretty easy. Now, this sounds funny saying this in a webinar about migrating to the cloud, but the reality is migrating to the cloud is a lot simpler than historical upgrades have been, even on-prem to on-prem in-house, okay? And we'll talk about that in a bit. It buys you some time. Back to that last SaaS comment about software as a service. If you are looking at a replacement, say for planning or for Essbase or for HFN, maybe different tool sets within Oracle or externally from Oracle, hope not, but it's possible. Moving to cloud infrastructure is a very simple way to buy you some time to keep making those decisions as you lay out the roadmap to your next generation of your EPM or financial reporting system tool, and saves you money. Again, we'll dig deeper into this one, how actually moving to the cloud can save you some money. So before I hand it over to Jeff, we get the question a lot of, why does IRX Solutions promote OCI so much? Yes, we're an Oracle partner, but as I mentioned before, we're also a Microsoft partner, AWS partner, Google partner, and so on. Our roots, of course, did come from Hyperion, which naturally is a natural path to Oracle. But the reason why we're so fond of Oracle cloud infrastructure over the other vendors that are out there today, and by the way, nothing wrong with hybrid or multi-cloud environments. It's actually a very safe way of running your cloud business. But the three big reasons that I always talk to customers about really come down to this: the cost performance ratio, right? What you're paying for cloud infrastructure for your actual, in this case, EPM or Essbase stack, we'll kind of call it that. You're not going to get a better bang for the buck than going to OCI over their vendors. And the reason for that is storage costs are substantially cheaper, even though it's higher performing storage across the board. That's a general statement, it's a true statement. And network traffic. When it comes to cloud infrastructure, you have to get stuff to that quote unquote someone else's computer data center, right? Well, that network traffic is where the other guys like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, they ding you big time on that. We've had many customers over the last couple of years just blown away at their first few bills they've got during project upgrades and migrations when they see from Microsoft, as an example, kind of pick it on them for the moment. Hey, here's my network egress traffic bill. They're blown away, right? Oracle gives 10 terabytes free a month of egress traffic. What that means is substantial dollars in savings. So cost performance ratio is the biggest reason we're big fans of OCI. Second is simplicity of use, right? I'm a tech person by nature. Now I run a company, but over the years of being architect and hands-on field implementation consultant, I found that the simpler tools to use, the more productive I can be with that tool. Okay, so simplicity of use, you're not going to find a better GUI or interface than Oracle's Web Console to actually manipulate, modify, and build out your ecosystem. Okay, the last thing, this is kind of may seem like it's common sense, but I'll mention it again, is that Oracle software is being engineered for years now to run better on OCI. Let's face it, why would they not? Okay, so it's kind of a no-brainer if you're sticking with Oracle products, Oracle Database, EPM, or Essbase in this case, it's going to perform better and optimize on OCI engineered systems and services. So on this note, I want to hand it to Chuck Henkel here at IARC. He's going to kind of jump into a little more information about patching, upgrading, some of the considerations, as well as talking a bit about some of the options to migrating. So Jeff, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, and here you go.
All right, thanks, Joe. So let's talk a little bit about staying on your current software. So let's say you're considering a move to cloud infrastructure. This gives you a couple opportunities. If your current software is already latest and greatest, then it may be a very simple kind of lift to move you onto a new version in OCI, taking advantage of that hardware opportunity. Or if you are on an older version, then moving to a new platform at the same time you're upgrading version kind of gives you the benefits of that new version, right? So you're getting long-term support. Oracle's already said, I think now they moved the date again to 2034 for on-premise EPM. So you can get the full range support, quarterly patching, security patching, all of those things that you want in your environment, your IT shop would require in the new version. If you're an Essbase customer, you also have the opportunity to start leveraging Essbase 21C, which is the future of Essbase. It is bundled. It can be bundled right now with the 11.2 suite, or coming later, it's going to be the only embedded product. And we're hearing that's going to happen around 11.2.14. So about 2 versions away from where we're at today on 11.2.12. So one of the things that's kind of nice about being on the 11.2 stack is around maintenance releases. So right now, if you're on the old 11.1.2 stack of EPM, you're probably aware of the fact that every product gets its own little patch bundle, and you have to apply them individually and try to align them. And even as a guy who's done this for a long time, it's a bit of a hassle. Moving forward, you don't have that hassle. They come as complete environment patch sets that you basically apply to a system, and then everything gets kind of auto-aligned to work together, which is really pretty nice. All right, Joe, let's go ahead and go to the next slide if you don't mind. So we've basically boiled this all down to 3 simple ways to kind of move from on-premise to the cloud. So one is an as-is migration. That's basically take what you have now, move it over to the cloud. 2 is a greenfield approach. And then 3 is a lift and shift model. And we're going to dive into each one of these in detail as we move forward here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about as-is migration. So let's say you're already on 11.2, you're already on supported hardware and software in terms of operating systems and underlying infrastructure. What we can do is we can basically pick up your on-premise system and simply shift it to the cloud. We can also shift it between clouds. So for example, using technology like Rackware, who we partner with, we can take either cloud or on-premise system and move it somewhere else. So that's a great way to lift and shift what you have today. And then once it's in the new location, if there's any need, we could always apply any patching or maintenance releases that we need. There's almost no outage requirement. We would do a test migration to make sure it all goes according to plan, and then your outage is basically the time it takes to lift and or to shift your users to the new environment, and that could be a new URL or a load balancer value or something along those lines. And then the testing is pretty straightforward. We do a high level validation on our side, confirming that all the integrations are good. And then as an end user company, you can do a deeper UAT to, tie out data, numbers, reports, processes for integration, all those good sorts of things. And from a time frame perspective, this could be as simple as a 2-month project, or as long as 4 months. It kind of depends on how many environments we're moving, how many servers. Those are typically the bigger drivers kind of in the time model. And the risk is low because we're never touching your on-premise system. We're simply building a new system via migration into a new environment. All right, let's talk a little bit about option 2. This is a greenfield approach for cloud migration. So in this scenario, we're basically going to perform the same installation version. We're going to build out the servers brand new in OCI, and then migrate using standard EPM Hyperion methodologies to move objects from source to target. So those kind of vary from product to product. Planning is a little bit different from HFM, which is a little bit different from FDME, but they're all documented and standardized. And again, we would build that greenfield environment with the latest and greatest versions. And again, risk of outage, the outage requirement's really low because all the work can be done while your current system is live. And then there's a final cutover and possible final data refresh to make sure everything is in sync. And usually during that final cutover, there will be some outage because you don't want users in your current on-premise system making changes while you're trying to move things to the new OCI environment, right? Because then you have you're trying to hit a moving target. Generally, we do a deeper level of validation here. Probably all the data and all the reports and integrations will have to be confirmed, which does drive the project timeline up a little higher. Again, we see these as around 3 to 6 months. There's a little more moderate risk because by moving everything in this fashion to a brand new environment, things like integrations in particular have to be looked at a little closer. Other things that kind of pop out in these sort of migrations are, scripting, task scheduler jobs, any kind of automation usually has to get modified in a shift of this nature. So that does increase the risk just a little bit. And then our third option is the lift and shift cloud migration. So in this scenario, we're performing a new latest install of the latest releases. And this in particular comes up a little bit more when we're truly changing versions. So let's say you're still on 11.1.2.2 or 3 or 4. There's more work to be done to shift you to the latest and greatest EPM software. Even if you were to do it on premise, you would run into these challenges. But you also layer in, of course, the complexity of moving to a new environment in OCI. One of the things that you get in this model is that if you're an Essbase, planning Essbase customer, now we would open up the conversation to, is now the right time to move you to Essbase 21C? Out of the box, the 11.2 code line still uses EPM's 11.1.2.4 Essbase under the covers. So like I noted, until I think 11.2.14 comes along, Essbase 21C isn't truly baked into the product, but there are ways to deploy it today with any version of 11.2. Outage requirements low. All the work in your current system keeps happening. And then again, we have that sort of final cutover date that drives a small outage, right? To make sure that we lock the old system, do a final migration, and we can true up data and processes between both systems. This is the highest level of validation, especially if you're moving to a whole new version of Essbase, like with 21C under the covers. And again, project timelines vary depending on how many servers we're dealing with and how many environments, but our general experience is around 3 to 6 months, and it probably has roughly the same amount of moderate risk as you find in option 2.
So, hey, Jeff, a quick question. I noticed that a lot of these things, or actually all 3 of them, do have this other requirement of being low. Is that typical when you're moving to cloud migration, when you're actually migrating to cloud infrastructure? It sounds like because you're not touching your source system.
Correct.
Right?
So in all of these moves, because the source system isn't changing, we have the ability to work with database backups or LCM exports at the object level, and we're never really touching your production environment. The only time or the only exception to that is when we go to pull Essbase data. There's usually a period there where the application has to be in read-only mode for a little bit while we get the level 0 or full exports out. But once that passes, we're not touching the system. So it's always pretty low risk in terms of out requirements.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Would you mind talking a bit about DR in the cloud and how that can benefit Hyperion a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the nice things about moving to the cloud versus on-premise for a lot of organizations is that DR becomes a lot easier to achieve, and it can be done at the click of a button. So the first thing to always understand in any DR scenario is what your particular application needs. For most customers, this is a business critical application, but the business criticality tends to change depending on the type of data we're dealing with. So like, for example, HFM tends to have higher RPO, RTO requirements because it's used for reporting out to the street for a lot of public companies. Planning Essbase can sometimes, as an analytics tool, be a little more flexible around those. But either way, the nice thing is in the cloud, there are native offerings. So Oracle has FSDR, which stands for full stack disaster recovery. So you can use Oracle's model to DR all the subsets, the database, the application servers, et cetera, in the environment. Or you could use our preferred methodology, which is Rackware, who I mentioned earlier, which is a third-party software product that actually Joe will go through some licensing costs and numbers on here a little bit later. But it's very, very cheap but easy to deploy solution that allows you to customize what gets DR'd, how it gets DR'd, how often, to meet your RPO and RTO requirements. And all of those things can be done relatively easily once you understand what I'll call the core DR drivers, which are here at the very top again. RPO, RTO, what's the appetite for an outage, et cetera. So, that's kind of DR in a nutshell, but it's much easier to achieve in the cloud with the basic technologies that just exist there. By the way, Oracle and other cloud providers have built out these data centers, and it sometimes is on-premise. Okay, let's go on to the next one. All right, so how do you get the most out of OCI cloud infrastructure for your deployments? Using cloud native services can save time and money. That's all there is to it. So first thing is everything by default in the cloud is built to be redundant. There are multiple regions. Those regions have multiple fault domains. So when you build something, you have the flexibility to put servers in different fault domains or essentially different points within the same region's data center. The networking is built with redundancy. You can build custom images to meet your own standards. So if you have a standard Windows 2019 server build, you can move that over to OCI and use that to deploy your workloads. Same thing's true for Linux. It comes with baked in very robust monitoring and alerting, so you can understand your resource usage and limitations, even your billing you can monitor. You can even do things like dynamic scaling for up and down for peak times. So, I like to use Essbase as a prime example here. You can set up auto scaling, for example, on Essbase disk to so that, during your plan cycle, for example, when you're going to have a lot of users uploading data, saving forms, running aggregations, you can upscale that to say, normally it hovers at around, 10%, but during these peak times, I want it to be able to burst to 150%. And you can configure that. And then for non-primary environments, you can even enable things like auto shutdown and startup. So let's say you only use your dev or QA environment the third week of every month. You can shut it down the rest of the time. And then the only thing you're paying for is the storage costs, which are always there. But you're not paying for CPU utilization time for environments that nobody's going to be using.
That's actually a good point too, Jeff, and we'll talk more about that when we get into how we kind of priced out a real world model in a moment here. But yes, the idea of the shutting down and starting up as needed services, it's one of the big benefits you have to cloud infrastructure is you can sort of pick and choose when you want these things running. So if you think about it, when you folks have today, you're paying for your infrastructure on site today, while you're consuming resources and your VMs are running and your IT operationally is charging back to your department more than likely for utilization. When it comes to cloud infrastructure, OCI specifically, it's very, very simple to work and kind of develop some routines and processes. Those peak times, as Jeff mentioned, maybe you turn on during business hours dev, but it's being turned off in the evening. So you're only being metered for storage, not for compute and services and whatnot. And same thing for your scheduling up and down for peak times, your resources. That's a good point. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
So there are various options for migrating to OCI, and I want to, and again, thank you for sharing some insight on some of the ways you can actually save organizations some time and money. I want to point out there really are a few standard areas to be considered in any kind of cloud migration project. For both time and cost elements, right? Kind of boil it down to 3 or 4 things here, right? First and foremost, what does a cloud migration really cost? And we're going to use OCI again for this context of today's presentation. Naturally, you're going to have some kind of a cost for the infrastructure itself, your OCI infrastructure. Okay, that's going to be something. The nice thing about cloud infrastructure, and again, just tooting Oracle's horn in this regard, is before you sign up with Oracle, you're going to get what's called a bill of materials, right? It's basically a rough draft, if you will, of your cost estimates for your particular infrastructure ecosystem. Oracle has a fantastic calculator online for free. It is the same stuff that you're going to get from me as a partner reselling or from Oracle sales reps. You can actually see the retail pricing, worst case scenario of what you're looking at for infrastructure costs. In our model, Jeff will go into in our scenario in a few minutes here. Jeff will discuss to you guys what we kind of built out in terms of resources. You're of course going to have your consulting services. We'll kind of call this the RH Solutions expense to kind of toot our horns here, right? In other words, what is your firms you're working with for consulting? What is us or somebody else? There's going to be that cost element tied to, of course, your migration project, and of course, you're going to have any kind of third party or required licenses, right? That might go with that. Some cloud infrastructure, like for example, if you move things from Windows over to a Linux-based implementation for a platform change, you can save some serious money. Windows licensing is very, very expensive. Oracle doesn't charge you for Oracle Enterprise Linux, which is now supported by just about everything out there, except, if I'm wrong, yell at me here, some HFM engines today and DRM, right? That's it, Jeff, the last 2 pieces?
Correct.
Yep. And there's rumors on the street that, one of those might be coming soon to Linux support, but we can't talk about that because all safe harbor stuff. The last piece of the puzzle, though, and I kind of put this in the cost column, is really going to be the time element, right? You have a time element involved with the project, whether it's 2 to 4 months for the migration or 3 to 6 months or 9 months, whatever, that has to be accounted for because time is money. We all know that, understand that. So again, you probably saw from our 3 different scenarios here, the longest time frame was 6 months, and that might seem aggressive for a critical financial system. But when I tell you that, in fact, we have moved and are moving customers that have 30 plus production servers in a 6-8 month window, super nuts, from clicking the first button to going live. It's possible and it's done all the time. Okay, so your time element needs to be considered, but that means you have to have, of course, buy-in and be there to help out with the process. And then downtime or outage time, as Jeff pointed out before, in my mind, is also a time cost that needs to be considered. So taking a deeper dive now, Jeff, you want to take us through, I want to kind of call a real world example of an actual cloud migration. So you can kind of think about what it costs and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk mostly to the diagram over here, but the details are kind of on the left-hand side. But essentially what we have is we have an on-premise production data center, right? So if you think of something like a VMware on-prem or a series of physical servers, doesn't really matter. What we have here is an EPM application server. This was a Linux host that was running all of the front door components, if you will. So we've got the workspace out there. We've got Calc Manager and financial reporting, those sorts of tools. And this was a move of EPM 11 to 12, so the latest and greatest. And then my central server there, because it's got the Windows only components on it, we're running Windows 2019 with HFM DRM. And then we have an Essbase 21C server with its own domain, because it's kind of its own separate beastie, but that's a Linux box as well. And then at the very bottom, I have a database server with some attached storage, right? And for on-premises purposes, this could be SAN, NAS, the flavor doesn't necessarily matter all that much. So what we did is, I think you switch slides on, there we go. What we did was we set up a Rackware server in the Ashburn region of OCI, built out that server, licensed it, and we picked up those 4 hosts, the 3 application servers in the center there and the database at the bottom, and we moved them over to OCI. So we basically replicated those hosts across and stood them up and attached the various storages that they need at the database level. Well, actually it auto attaches and creates them for me. And then we basically test and validate. Assuming, there's no IP, changes or anything of that nature, it's as simple as clicking a button and letting the migration happen and then testing things out. In my case, I had some IP changes, which I fixed and then fired up my product and I was off to the races. So if Joe goes to the next slide here, you will see kind of some of the details. So the initial migration for my J2E Linux app server took about 40 minutes, right? My HFM DRM server took closer to 2 hours. As a general rule of thumb, in my experience, Windows hosts take a little bit longer. A lot of that is driven around the fact that we spend a little more time with kind of what I'll call the OS level stuff. So the registry and all that good detail. And then my Essbase server took about another 45 minutes, a little bit longer than my J2E server, but it had a whole lot more storage attached to it, as did my SQL database server, which also had a lot more storage attached to it. That was the first migration. What you'll notice is on secondary migrations, the Linux boxes get a lot faster because essentially I'm tracking delta changes at this point. Took about 4 minutes for both of those boxes, and the Windows servers were still a smidge slower, but we're talking sub 30 minutes to do another migration with this utility. And the top screenshot is just kind of what the RMM or the Rackware utility looks like when you're running it. I had 4 servers in my wave. A wave is a grouping of server migrations or server DR events, and it picked them up and it moved them over to the new site. All in one big swing. And a stage 2 is basically a deployment of a server into your cloud environment, in this case, OCI. You can also do these for DR purposes, what's called a stage 1, where you're basically just writing images of the disks or of the hosts, pardon me, to local storage at the RMM server. And those are much quicker.
So Jeff, if I could ask a quick question, this is great information. Thank you. So what I'm seeing here is, again, you're moving about 5 terabytes roughly of on-premise ecosystem servers and infrastructure up to Oracle's cloud infrastructure in this case. And if I read this right, doing this in parallel, we're looking at roughly about 1 hour and 48 minutes as the biggest hit on doing that.
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
So what does this kind of cost us, right? As I mentioned in the conversation, we want to give you folks some real world examples. And again, as you saw, this was a sample environment, right? But it does include a full distributed installation, mixed platform, right? And we actually use SQL Server for this. The only thing not priced out here, to be honest, is for the infrastructure is going to be your database cost of SQL Server licensing. If you're going Oracle database, it could be the same model, even. Okay. So again, with those 4 servers Jeff mentioned, a J2EE server, HFM app server, Essbase server, a SQL database server, you'll see we added a 5th one here called the Rackware RMM instance. That's kind of a temporary one. We kind of mark this with their utilization, and this is how cloud works. So you basically pay for how much you're using something, storage aside. Okay, so when you price out cloud infrastructure, you want to be realistic in saying, if I have a production environment, I'm going to assume it's 100% utilized. That means 24/7, and depending upon which calculator you look at, that could be from 731 hours to 744 hours a month. I always use 744 hours a month, even though some are shorter. This way we know in reality, here's the worst case scenario. But to give an example here, this J2E server, which will be your foundation server for your Hyperion folks, that 2 CPU is actually equivalent to 4 logical CPUs. Okay, so it's actually a 4 CPU box as far as you're used to hearing today, which is pretty robust for a foundation box. That server running on Linux is only going to cost you retail about $144 a month. Okay, not a whole lot of money to run that. You can see the Windows server, the HFM server, as well as the SQL server. They cost a little more because there are Windows licensing requirements to go with this. And again, this is something which this infrastructure is all based upon virtual infrastructure. I'm not talking about bare metal here, which is a possibility, but there are very few customers that I think can justify running Hyperion on bare metal servers for within the infrastructure. But anyway, if you add all this up and you kind of look down the bottom line down there, you're talking about an estimated monthly cost of about $1,200 a month. Okay, realistically, that puts you at about $14,000 a year to run this ecosystem up on Oracle's cloud infrastructure. Okay, that's about it. You'd be hard pressed to run the same virtual environment on premise in your own data centers for that similar cost. If you go back and ask operationally what's actually costing you. The Rackware server in this case, 25% utilization, because really after the migration's done, you're getting rid of that thing anyway, unless you're going to go with the DR model using Rackware. But for our purposes, we kind of prorated that at about 25% utilization. So let's take this project and let's just say, all right, I went to Jeff and said, price this thing out for me, Jeff. What am I looking at? I want to get this thing up into OCI. I got a 6-month window to do this. What am I looking for? Well, the infrastructure for OCI we mentioned a minute ago, that's going to roughly cost you for the first year about $14,000. Second, you're going to cost you about 12.5 again, because Rackware is being phased out in this model if it's just for migration only. There is a one-time Rackware migration license cost. And you can see it's a pretty low cost. And the reason for that is Rackware is a phenomenal tool. It's designed to run as few servers as one or as many servers as you have. It's a very simple licensing model for this. And it's roughly about $1,500 for the 4 licenses you'll need to get for its migration purposes. Again, you can leverage Rackware for disaster recovery. We have a whole webinar just on that Jeff did last year. It's fantastic. It's worth watching that if you have a chance. And if you want to see more in action, happy to mention that to you and assist with you as well. Consulting services. This is where we kind of give away the farm, but to be very realistic, if we took that exact model of those 4 servers fully baked with applications and products, which is the whole Hyperion suite, and you came to us to price that out for you, including supporting you for your UAT and your go lives and the whole 9 yards, we're looking at about $56,000 in services for that project, which means for an estimated cost of about $72K for year 1, we can move you from on-premise today up to OCI within about a 4 to 6 month window. All said and done, go live, no problems after that. It's an approximate cost of about 18 grand per server. And then year 2, all you're paying for is infrastructure, OCI. So you can see it's a very, very cost-effective model for this particular environment and for this particular model of actually moving you with Rackware. Again, keep in mind, Rackware is a lift and shift model. I'm sorry, it's a shift model where it's an as is to as is. Okay, we want to give you guys some real examples. And we can happily price out anything you have anyway, or options too, if you want us to as well, very, very simply. So Jeff, would you mind taking a minute and kind of talking about some things that could go wrong? In other words, what have we seen in our experiences recently, in the past, working through nowadays when it comes to cloud migration projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this question I think also came up to some degree in the Q&A, but let me dive into it a little bit easier than I can when I'm typing out an answer. So the first thing when you're moving to any cloud platform, and it's just as true as OCI as it would be for Azure, AWS, Google, pick your flavor, is you got to get the paperwork done up front. So in other words, all the contracts, all the legalese can slow things down depending on how fast your organization moves. The other side of that is technical architecture decisions. If you think of OCI as an extension of your current environment, right? So you already have data centers, most likely. It's like adding a new data center. Whenever you add a new data center, there's a lot of technical architecture decisions that have to get ironed out. And it's best if they get ironed out really well up front to make everything that flows after that seamless. So you just want to make sure that you have a unique network, range of addresses, things like that, that you're following best practices that already exist within your company when you're making these architecture decisions. And that can add time because you just got to get all the right players aligned, and you want to make sure you do it right. This is a definite measure, twice cut once kind of a situation. And then you want to make sure that you have kind of a proper design up front. So understand what's happening in your current EPM environment, understand what you're trying to achieve in terms of planning to move to a new one, and make sure you're building the new environment with proactive design decisions that don't shoehorn you into something you don't want moving forward. Getting your own team involved, right? Making sure everybody's on the same page. And then, last but not least, training, right? OCI may very well be new, or if you pick a different cloud, that may be a new technology, and you'll want to make sure your staff has time to get up to speed on it. And then if you're making a shift in terms of versioning, EPM 11.1.2 to EPM 11.2 looks largely the same. There's very little that changes there. But if you were jumping to 21C, then you would want to understand that, that's kind of a whole new look and feel for Essbase. And you'll want to have more training time involved for your staff to make sure they understand the new product and the new direction of Essbase compared to what they're used to seeing historically.
Thank you, Jeff. So as kind of finish our presentation today, a couple points here. I want to throw a couple case studies for you. We kind of went back to our client arsenal we've done over the last couple of years and pulled out an example of option 1, 2, and 3 for you. I'll just kind of quickly skim through these things. The first one was a life sciences pharma client. We actually they had leveraged Rackware to do their migration. There are a couple of challenges they had. Was a true lift and shift requirement, no version chain, almost as is to as is. It was a corporate move off their current VM on-premise data center up to OCI. They had some issues because they had a lot of high cost internally, oversized, not properly architected infrastructure. One of the things Jeff did not mention, just run out of time here, is that when we do a migration to cloud infrastructure, it's a great opportunity to right size your infrastructure. Okay, so you can look at it and see, hey, how does it run on OCI's base configurations? Do we have to tune it up, tune it down accordingly to save some dollars, or add some more resources? It's simple as just sliding bars and rebooting servers. Okay. They also had a 15-minute DR requirement, which they could not meet. So the solution was we actually cloned their existing VMware systems into OCI deployed instances, leveraged Rackware for disaster recovery purposes, as well as some of the migration stuff, and had to deploy a multi-region SQL Server DB configuration for their protection. What they found in the end was about a 26 CPU core reduction in OCI, and they were able to accomplish a 15-minute DR replication across regions, okay, which is pretty amazing. I haven't that before. Our next case study was option 2. And again, option 2 is sort of a greenfield build out, if you will. Was again, it was the same version in this case. This is a retail client. They had a 3 to 4 month timeline to go live, which is extremely close. Okay, and it was a split off company. They basically had no in-house resources to help with the IT components, lack of data center staff they were hiring because it's a spin-off company. So they had some pretty tough challenges. And the solution for these folks was to basically build out multi-environment OCI across 2 different regions, migrate all the applications as is in option 2. Again, a 3 to 4 month window. So this all occurred from our side of the house. And we provided some OCI and day 2 minute services for a short period of time to get them comfortable with the new OCI interface, which they came back afterward and kind of cut that contract short, believe it or not, because they're like, this is very simple to use. Okay. This implementation was fantastic. We actually came in 3 weeks early with the final project, and we were able to handle and give them some staff aug as they were getting through the critical business activities and restructuring. So they're very, very happy with that model. And the last option, it's a manufacturing client. You may have heard of them before, Motorola. They had a pretty interesting scenario. They were on a very, very, very old, outdated version of Hyperion, 11.1.2.1, believe it or not, hosted on a third-party data center. They had no DR process. They couldn't meet their SLA. So our solution for them was a lift and shift approach. We actually built out Greenfield infrastructure up in OCI for them, which had additional sustained support. It actually, as Jeff mentioned, is now 2034. We had to migrate them off of their third-party data center into OCI, and then we had to actually design for the first time a DR strategy because they had some pretty legit RTOs and RPOs that we actually had to meet for them. And again, they had the entire stack, including some old legacy software. So we actually built multiple environments, believe it or not, for them across multiple regions. Was pretty amazing for them. It's that one tool, IR, which has kind of been killed off for quite some time now, but this is critical for this customer, and they use it today still, is just by building out the same IR, the future version, they could get it, highest version they get to, right, which wasn't 11.2 because it's gone. They saw 67% rendering time reduction for reports. That was amazing for them. And their actual monthly close process for financial management was a 38% faster. Nothing changed in the application. No, just simply new hardware on OCI with the most current version of software. So what's next? Where do we go from here? Step one is this: getting started and moving OCI is very, very simple. If you have somebody you're familiar with, contact your Oracle sales account manager. If you don't have somebody, give us a ring, drop us a line. We know tons of them. If not, we can find out who that person would be for you. Okay. They're very, very easy to work with. They're very eager to work with you, obviously, when you're looking at OCI as an option. And they have some great resources at their disposal, which they can help on the Oracle side, or of course, you can leverage ourselves as sort of intermediary, but the Oracle sales rep is the first person to speak to. If you don't know them, let us know. We can kind of help figure that piece out for you. Scheduling a demo, scheduling an obligation technical analysis. So we do this all the time. It's actually pretty much all that I do day in, day out lately. So what we do is we have an infra survey. We can work with you and your IT team. No obligation. We're not looking to get paid to do this for you. We're happy just to jump on the phone with you, go through what you have today, see what you have, and we can quote that out for you and say, hey, here's a draft future state architecture for OCI, how it would look roughly, right? And give you what's called as bill of materials. Again, draft, just to get some numbers in front of you, an estimated cost of services. We're not going to provide you step-by-step instructions at this point in time, but we want to help you guys get comfortable with, hey, is this even financially possible for us to go ahead and do this? Okay. After that's done, I always suggest, if you haven't already, set up an OCI trial. Now, OCI trials are interesting. If you go to the website and you can sign up for free, throw a credit card in, wham, bam, you get 30 days and $300 of free credits. Fantastic. Now, I'll give you a little secret information here about Oracle. If you're interested in seriously considering OCI and you work with your sales account manager, sales reps, they can probably get you a few bucks more on that trial. Okay. I'm not going to commit to that because I'm not Oracle, but historically, when we say, listen, this is a serious customer looking at this stuff, they can usually get you a little more than that, $300. That doesn't go a very, very long way. And the last thing here is set up a proof of concept environment. Now, this will be an expense, right? Because you have to build this thing out, or we help you, or whatever. But if you have multiple environments, if you have large scale environments, and you just want to see for yourself, hey, if I move this from A to B, well, what's it going to cost me? Is it going to even perform better? Right? A proof of concept is a very, very simple, quick way of doing that. Now, granted, you're not going to have fast connect and your full network exposure configured back and forth, or you could, depending. But it gives you a very easy way and almost a non-risk way of seeing, is OCI right for you or not? Okay, so proof of concept environments are fantastic. And again, you heard us mention Rackware probably 3 dozen times today. It's for a reason, because it does make things like POCs and fast migrations very, very easy to achieve and kind of work with. Jeff's a pro at this stuff, as well as most of the team here as well. If you want to see a demo of how that even works, happy to do so as well. So questions throughout the conversation, just some great questions that have been kind of pushed out here. What we'll do is we're going to grab those and we'll send them out afterward if you're interested, to attendees and stuff. But are there any more questions that folks have right now? I do see one out here. How long did the Motorola upgrade take? That actually, soup and nuts, wound up being about a 9-month project, because halfway through the project, they added another 2 products, a little longer than they wanted it to be. But it wasn't the end of the world. And that was the IR tool I was talking about. But their EPM stack was about 4.5 months to migrate. Any more questions? Anybody have? Okay. Well, we'll keep it up a couple more seconds here. I want to say thank you, and I appreciate everyone's time coming through today. Like I mentioned, we'll take the questions that were already answered, and what we'll do is we'll get those recorded for you folks, and we'll get them sent out if you can see that. We will post this webinar on our website as well. So feel free to share it, watch it later. If you have any questions whatsoever, you're welcome to reach out to us. Again, I want to thank you for your time today. Thanks, Jeff, for your input and your information as well. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Oh, I'm sorry. One more question that came in just now. Let's just grab this fast here. Oh, who's the Amazon gift card winner? That will be emailed out. All right. Well, thank you very much and have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.